He was a 75-pound weapon of muscle, grief, and teeth. 6 of his pack had already been exiled, and he had sent 3 veteran handlers to the hospital. The military deemed him a lost cause. But they didn't know Corporal Harper Reynolds, and they didn't know his real name. The Texas heat radiating off the concrete at Lackland Air Force Base was entirely unforgiving, but it was nothing compared to the suffocating tension inside Block 9. Block 9 was the isolation ward for the 341st Training Squadron, a place reserved for military working dogs that had been broken by war. And no dogs were more broken than the legendary Korengal 7. 8 months ago, an elite ranger unit had been ambushed in the jagged, merciless mountains of Afghanistan's Korengal Valley. The human casualties were catastrophic, but miraculously, all 7 of the unit's German Shepherd K9S had survived the blasts and the gunfire. They were brought back to American soil as heroes, but the war had followed them home. The trauma of the ambush, combined with the sudden, violent loss of their handlers, had fundamentally altered the dogs. One by one, the military had tried to rehabilitate them. Dozens of the most experienced canine handlers in the armed forces had stepped into the kennels, armed with patience, treats, and protective gear, hoping to coax the elite dogs back into service. One by one, the dogs refused. They had become dangerously unpredictable. Some cowered in the corners of their runs, shivering so violently they fractured their own teeth. Others turned hyper-aggressive, launching themselves at the chain-link fencing whenever a human in a uniform approached. Within 6 months, 6 of the 7 dogs had been officially designated as untrainable liabilities. They were honorably retired, shipped off to highly specialized sanctuary facilities in Wyoming, completely isolated from the military life they once knew. Only one remained, the 7th dog. His temporary file listed him as Kaiser, a placeholder name given to him by the medevac unit after his collar and identification tags were shredded by shrapnel. Kaiser was the largest of the pack, a massive German shepherd with a coat as dark as midnight and a jagged, hairless scar slashing across his muzzle. He was also the most lethal. While the other 6 dogs had shown fear, Kaiser showed only rage. In the span of 2 months, he had hospitalized 3 different handlers. The last incident had been severe. A veteran handler had tried to slip a lead over Kaiser's neck, and the dog had clamped down on the man's forearm, crushing the bone straight through the protective Kevlar bite suit. Since that day, Kaiser had been locked in solitary confinement at the very end of Block 9. His euthanasia papers were already sitting on the desk of the base commander, Major Higgins. It was only a matter of a signature. Corporal Harper Reynolds stood at the entrance of Block 9, the heavy steel door completely blocking the Texas sun. At 23, Harper was considered somewhat of an anomaly among the handlers. She was small in stature, soft-spoken, and possessed a stubborn streak that regularly landed her in hot water with her superiors. But she had a gift. Harper didn't just train dogs. She understood the profound, unspoken language of trauma. She had successfully rehabilitated 3 K9S that other handlers had given up on, earning her a quiet, grudging respect on base. But Master Sergeant Brody, the kennel master, had drawn a hard line when it came to Kaiser. "Don't even look down that hallway, Reynolds," Brody warned, his heavy boots echoing on the concrete as he approached her. He was a broad-shouldered man whose face looked carved from granite, and he pointed a thick finger toward the heavy steel door at the end of the block. "Major Higgins is signing the order this afternoon. The vet is coming at 1,700 hours. It's done." "He's a soldier, Master Sergeant," Harper said, her voice steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "We don't leave soldiers behind. Not when they're bleeding, and not when they're broken." "He crushed Sergeant Miller's arm last week, Harper. The dog is gone. Whatever made him a military working dog died in that valley. Now he's just a loaded gun with a hair trigger, and I'm not risking another one of my people." Brody sighed, his authoritative tone softening just a fraction. "He's suffering. Let him go." Harper didn't reply immediately. Instead, she walked past Brody, her boots clicking softly on the floor, until she reached the chain-link enclosure at the very end of the hall. Kaiser was pacing. He didn't walk, he stalked, his massive shoulders rolling with predatory grace. When he saw Harper approach the fence, he didn't bark. That was the most terrifying thing about him. He simply stopped, locked his amber eyes onto hers, and let out a low, guttural rumble that vibrated through the metal wiring. His lips curled back, exposing white, razor-sharp teeth. Harper didn't flinch. She looked into those amber eyes and saw exactly what no one else seemed to recognize. It wasn't malice. It wasn't madness. It was a suffocating, unbearable grief. Kaiser was trapped in a perpetual state of defense, guarding a perimeter for a handler who was never coming back. "Give me 2 weeks," Harper said over her shoulder. Brody scoffed from down the hall. "Are you deaf, Corporal? Higgins is signing the papers today." "Then I'll go to Higgins," Harper shot back, finally turning around. "You know my record, Brody. I have never failed a rehab protocol. Give me 2 weeks. If I can't put a leash on him and walk him out of that cage without a bite suit by day 14, I will personally assist the vet at 1,700 hours. But you owe him this. The military owes him this." Brody stared at her, his jaw tight. He looked at the scarred, terrifying animal behind the fence, then back to the determined young woman. He knew Harper's reputation. She was relentless. "I'm not giving you 2 weeks, Reynolds," Brody growled. "I'm giving you 1. 7 days. And you do this on your own time, off the clock. You step inside that cage without my authorization, I'll have you court-martialed before you hit the ground. Understood?" "Understood," Harper said, her eyes already turning back to the dark German shepherd. The clock had started. She had 7 days to save a dog that had refused the world. For the first 4 days, Harper didn't even touch the handle of Kaiser's cage. While other handlers believed in establishing immediate dominance, entering the kennel in a padded bite suit, standing tall and forcing the dog to submit, Harper took the opposite approach. She knew that to a dog suffering from severe PTSD, dominance looked exactly like a threat, and Kaiser was a master at neutralizing threats. Instead, Harper dragged a canvas folding chair into the narrow hallway, placing it exactly 3 feet from the chain-link mesh of Kaiser's run. She didn't wear a uniform. She wore plain civilian clothes, a faded gray t-shirt, and soft sweatpants, stripping away the smell of starch, boot polish, and military authority. And then she simply sat. For hours on end, Harper occupied the space just outside his territory. She brought a stack of worn paperback novels and read aloud, her voice a calm, rhythmic murmur in the echoing kennel block. She read science fiction, history, and poetry. The content didn't matter. The cadence did. She wanted Kaiser to learn the sound of her voice without associating it with a command, a demand, or a threat. At first, Kaiser's reaction was violent. He lunged at the fence, his jaws snapping the air inches from Harper's face, the chain link rattling furiously under his weight. Harper never flinched. She didn't stop reading, didn't raise her voice, and most importantly, didn't make eye contact. To a traumatized alpha, direct eye contact was a challenge. She kept her eyes on the pages, projecting an aura of complete, unbothered calm. By the end of day 2, the lunging stopped. Kaiser resorted to pacing heavily along the fence line, panting aggressively. By day 4, the pacing slowed. Kaiser retreated to the back corner of his run, lying down on the cool concrete, though his amber eyes never left her. He was waiting for the trick. He was waiting for her to put on the bulky Kevlar suit, grab a heavy lead, and try to force him into submission, just like all the others. But Harper was running out of time. Reading wasn't enough. She needed a breakthrough, and she needed it fast. On the night of the 5th day, unable to sleep, Harper sat in the base archives, bathed in the harsh fluorescent light of the records room. She had pulled every unclassified and partially classified file she could find on the Korengal ambush. If she was going to reach this dog, she needed to know exactly what broke him. She sifted through after-action reports, medical evaluations, and logistics manifests. The details of the ambush were gruesome. The Ranger unit had been pinned down in a narrow ravine. The handler attached to Kaiser, a young staff sergeant named James, had been mortally wounded in the opening volley. Harper read the witness testimonies from the surviving soldiers. As she read, her brow furrowed. She cross-referenced the tactical reports with the veterinary behavioral logs from the 3 handlers Kaiser had attacked at Lackland. Suddenly, her breath hitched. Her eyes darted back and forth across the pages, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had found it. The twist that everyone, from the top brass down to the kennel masters, had completely missed. It was a matter of gear and a matter of identity. According to the combat reports, when Staff Sergeant James was shot, he had fallen heavily. Kaiser had immediately tried to drag him to cover by biting the drag handle on the back of James's standard-issue tactical vest. But James, knowing he was dying and seeing the enemy advancing, did the bravest thing a handler could do. He shouted a specific, high-stress extraction command to force his dog to flee and save himself. When Kaiser arrived at Lackland, the handlers who had tried to work with him were all wearing the same standard-issue tactical vests. and when they approached him, they used loud, authoritative commands. To Kaiser, they weren't handlers. They were walking triggers. Every time someone in a vest approached him with a loud voice, Kaiser wasn't attacking out of malice, he was violently panicking, transported right back to the ravine, desperately trying to stop a soldier from dying. But there was a second, even more heartbreaking revelation buried in the file. Harper pulled a scanned copy of Staff Sergeant James's personal field notebook. The medevac unit had labeled the dog Kaiser because that was the call sign written on the outside of the transport crate. But looking at James's handwritten notes, Harper realized Kaiser was just the name of the overall K9 operational unit. This specific dog, this massive, scarred, untouchable alpha, was not named Kaiser. His name was Ghost. For 8 months, through the loss of his handler, the trauma of the ambush, the flight across the world, and the endless days in isolation, no one had called this dog by his actual name. They had been commanding a stranger. He was utterly, entirely alone in the world. Tears pricked Harper's eyes. She slammed the file shut, grabbed her jacket, and sprinted out of the archives. The morning of the 6th day broke with a suffocating humidity. Master Sergeant Brody was already in Block 9, holding a heavy capture pole, preparing for the worst. When Harper walked through the steel doors, she wasn't carrying a bite suit. She wasn't carrying a leash. She was wearing her soft gray t-shirt and sweatpants, her hands entirely empty. "Reynolds, what the hell are you doing?" Brody barked, stepping in front of her. "It's day 6. If you're going in there, you put on the Kevlar. I am not watching you get mauled." "If I wear the Kevlar, he'll attack," Harper said, her voice eerily calm. "If I carry a weapon, he'll attack. I need you to stand back, Master Sergeant, and no matter what happens, do not open that door." Brody looked at her, utterly bewildered, but there was a fierce, unyielding fire in Harper's eyes that made him step aside. He kept his hand near the tranquilizer pistol on his belt, his heart in his throat. Harper walked to the chain-link door of the run. Inside, the massive German shepherd was already on his feet, his hackles raised, a low, terrifying growl vibrating in his chest. He was ready for a fight. Harper didn't hesitate. She unlocked the deadbolt. The heavy latch clicked, echoing loudly in the silent kennel block. She pushed the door open and stepped inside the cage. Instantly, the dog charged. He closed the distance in a fraction of a second, a blur of dark fur and bared teeth, 75 pounds of pure, lethal momentum barreling straight toward Harper's unprotected chest. Brody shouted, drawing his weapon. Harper didn't brace for impact. She didn't raise her hands to protect her face. Instead, in a move that defied every instinct of human survival, she dropped straight to her knees. She lowered her shoulders, tilted her chin up to expose her vulnerable neck, and looked directly into the dog's eyes. Right as the dog prepared to launch himself into the air for a killing bite, Harper spoke. Her voice was not a command. It was a soft, trembling whisper, carrying the weight of an old friend. "Stand down, Ghost," she whispered. "He's safe now." The dog froze. It was as if he had collided with an invisible wall. The German shepherd's front paws slammed into the concrete just inches from Harper's knees, sliding slightly with the momentum. His jaws snapped shut. The guttural growl died in his throat, replaced by a sharp, confused intake of breath. For the first time in 8 months, he heard his name. Ghost stood completely rigid, his amber eyes wide, staring at the woman kneeling on the floor. His ears twitched, swiveling forward. His chest heaved as he frantically sniffed the air, searching for the ghost of Staff Sergeant James. He didn't find the scent of blood, or gunpowder, or the stiff canvas of a tactical vest. He found only Harper, kneeling in absolute surrender. "I know, Ghost," Harper whispered, tears finally spilling over her eyelashes and tracking down her cheeks. "I know you tried to save him. You're a good boy. You did your job." A profound, visible tremor racked the dog's massive frame. The stiff, aggressive posture that had terrified the entire base suddenly collapsed. His hackles lowered, his ears pinned back flat against his skull. The fearsome alpha of the Kringle 7 let out a sound that broke Brody's heart from the hallway, a high, keening whimper of pure, devastating sorrow. Ghost took one tentative step forward, then another. He lowered his massive head, the jagged scar on his muzzle brushing against Harper's collarbone, and then, with a heavy sigh, he pressed his forehead squarely into her chest, burying his face in her shirt. Harper wrapped her arms slowly around his thick, muscular neck, burying her face in his dark fur, sobbing quietly as the dog melted against her. Outside the cage, Master Sergeant Brody slowly lowered his weapon, his mouth slightly open in stunned disbelief. The untouchable K9 had just surrendered. The transformation did not happen overnight. Healing, Harper knew, was not a sudden miracle. It was a grueling, non-linear trench war against memory. The morning after Ghost surrendered in the kennel, the real work began. Word of the cage incident spread through the 341st Training Squadron like a shockwave. Handlers whispered in the mess hall, swapping exaggerated versions of how Corporal Harper Reynolds had supposedly hypnotized the untouchable Alpha. But Master Sergeant Brody knew the truth. He had seen the raw, unpolished vulnerability of a broken soldier finally finding a safe harbor. For the next 3 weeks, Harper practically lived in Block 9. The military granted her a temporary, highly scrutinized extension on Ghost's euthanasia order, largely due to Brody cashing in decades of political capital with base command. Harper used every second of that extension. She began by hand-feeding Ghost his kibble, piece by piece, reinforcing that she was his provider, not his adversary. She slept on a cot in the hallway just outside his run, allowing him to memorize her scent and breathing patterns while he slept. Slowly, the impenetrable armor of the Korengal survivor began to crack. Ghost stopped pacing. The aggressive panting ceased. When Harper approached the chain-link mesh, his ears no longer pinned back in defense. Instead, they swiveled forward, his tail offering a tentative low wag. The breakthrough in their field training happened on a muggy Tuesday morning. Harper decided it was time to leave the isolation of Block 9. She didn't use a standard rigid military lead. She used a long, soft leather line. As they stepped out into the sprawling, sun-baked tactical training yard of Lackland Air Force Base, Ghost froze. The sounds of the base distant helicopter rotors, the crack of gunfire from the rifle range, the shouting of drill instructors hit him like a physical blow. He dropped his belly to the dirt, whining, his amber eyes darting frantically toward the tree line, expecting the invisible enemy of the Korengal Valley to emerge. "Right here, Ghost," Harper said firmly, dropping to one knee beside him, completely ignoring the noise. "Eyes on me." She didn't pet him to soothe him. Soothing a panic response only validated the fear. Instead, she demanded his focus. She pulled a small, worn rubber ball from her pocket. It was the exact type of reward toy Staff Sergeant James had used. She bounced it once. Ghost's eyes snapped from the tree line to the ball. The training kicked in. The ingrained discipline of a military working dog overpowered the phantom echoes of war. He sat up, his posture shifting from terrified to alert. When Harper tossed the ball, Ghost bolted after it, returning it to her hand with a joyful leap that made Brody, who was watching from the bleachers, quietly shake his head in disbelief. However, their progress hit a massive bureaucratic wall. Major Higgins, the base commander, was a man of unyielding metrics and risk assessment. He called Harper and Brody into his stark, fluorescent-lit office on the 21st day of the trial period. "Corporal Reynolds," Higgins began, leaning back in his leather chair, tapping a thick file folder on his desk. "I've read Master Sergeant Brody's reports. You've managed to put a leash on the dog. You've stopped him from attacking the kennel staff. That is commendable, but a petting zoo is not what we operate here." "With respect, sir, Ghost is operating at 80% of standard obedience protocols," Harper replied, standing at rigid attention. "80% obedience doesn't matter when the remaining 20% is a lethal liability," Higgins countered coldly. "This dog broke a man's arm. He is a combat veteran with severe PTSD. I cannot, in good conscience, certify him for active duty, nor can I release a trained weapon to the civilian public. He is a risk I am not willing to underwrite." "He just needs more time to desensitize to the tactical gear, Major," Harper pleaded, abandoning military stoicism. "The trigger was the extraction command and the vests. We are working through it." "Time is a luxury the United States Air Force does not possess, Corporal," Higgins said flatly. "I am giving you one final test. Tomorrow at 0800 hours, we are running a full-scale tactical simulation in the Northern Sector woods. Live blanks, flashbangs, full riot gear. You will run Ghost through the obstacle course during the simulation. If he breaks rank, if he panics, or if he shows a single ounce of aggression toward any uniformed personnel, the order goes back on my desk, and I will sign it. Is that clear?" Harper's stomach plummeted. It was too soon. Ghost was not ready for flashbangs and tactical vests. It was a setup designed for failure. "Crystal clear, sir," Harper said, her jaw locked. As they walked out of the command building, Brody put a heavy hand on her shoulder. "He's forcing your hand, Reynolds. The dog isn't ready for a hot zone." "Then we make him ready," Harper whispered, staring out across the tarmac. "Or we go down fighting." The morning of the final test brought a violent shift in the Texas weather. A massive front had rolled in overnight, painting the sky the color of bruised iron. Thunder rumbled ominously in the distance, and the air was thick with the metallic scent of impending rain. Harper stood at the edge of the northern sector woods, the soft leather lead clutched tightly in her hand. Beside her, Ghost sat at perfect attention. He looked magnificent, his dark coat gleaming, his scars a testament to his survival. But Harper could feel the tension vibrating through the leash. Across the field, a dozen soldiers from the Tactical Response Unit were warming up. They wore the bulky black tactical vests and Kevlar helmets that haunted Ghost's nightmares. Major Higgins stood under a canopy tent, holding a stopwatch. "Whenever you are ready, Corporal." Before Harper could issue the heel command, the sky tore open. It wasn't just a storm, it was a torrential deluge. Rain slammed into the dirt, turning the training field into slick mud within seconds. The wind howled, whipping the trees violently. Suddenly, a frantic voice crackled over the base-wide radio frequency. "Command, this is Perimeter Patrol, Sector 4. We have a code missing. I repeat, a code missing. A civilian contractor's child wandered away from the housing boundary into the northern woods. 6 years old, name is Toby. He's been missing for 45 minutes. The storm is causing flash floods in the ravine." The tactical simulation instantly evaporated. Higgins dropped his stopwatch, his face turning pale. The northern woods were sprawling, dense, and currently rapidly filling with rushing water. Finding a tiny 6-year-old in this blinding rain using human eyes would take hours the boy didn't have. "Deploy the trackers!" Higgins shouted into his radio. "Get the search and rescue canines out here immediately." Brody came running up to the tent, wiping water from his eyes. "Major, the standard tracking dogs are housed in Block 2. It's on the other side of the base. It'll take them 20 minutes to get here through this mud." Harper looked down at Ghost. The massive shepherd was already standing, his nose pointed toward the dense, rain-battered woods. He was sniffing the wind, his ears swiveling independently. He felt the urgency. He knew a mission was happening. "Major," Harper yelled over the roar of the thunder, "let us go. Ghost is a tracker. He was the best tracker in his ranger unit." Higgins looked at the scarred, dangerous dog, then at Harper. "He's not cleared, Reynolds. If he finds that boy and panics, he could hurt him." "He won't hurt him!" Harper screamed back, the rain plastering her hair to her face. "He's a soldier. Let him do his job." Higgins hesitated for a fraction of a second before giving a sharp nod. "Go." Harper didn't waste a second. She unclipped the leash. "Ghost, track," she commanded, throwing her arm toward the tree line. The German shepherd launched himself forward like a dark torpedo. He hit the muddy embankment and vanished into the dense underbrush. Harper sprinted after him, fighting through the thorny mesquite bushes and blinding rain. She didn't have a tactical vest. She didn't have a weapon. She only had her faith in the dog. For 10 agonizing minutes, they tore through the woods. The thunder sounded exactly like artillery fire. The cracking branches mimicked the snap of sniper rounds. Harper saw Ghost flinch twice, his combat trauma wrestling with his training. But every time he faltered, he looked back at Harper. She gave him a sharp, encouraging nod, and he pushed forward. They reached the edge of the deep ravine that cut through the northern sector. It was usually dry, but the storm had turned it into a raging, muddy torrent. Ghost stopped at the edge of the rushing water, barking furiously. Harper slid down the muddy bank, her heart stopping. Clinging to a thick, exposed tree root in the center of the swelling river was a tiny figure in a bright yellow raincoat. The water was already up to the boy's chest, threatening to sweep him away into the culvert. "Toby!" Harper screamed. The boy looked up, crying, his face pale with terror. Harper knew she couldn't reach him. The current was too fast, and the mud was too slick. Before she could radio for the tactical team, Ghost moved. The dog didn't wait for a command. He plunged into the churning water, his powerful legs fighting the vicious current. The water swept him sideways, submerging his head, but he fought his way up, kicking furiously until he reached the tree root. Ghost clamped his massive jaws not onto the boy, but onto the thick, heavy collar of the boy's yellow raincoat. It was the exact same dragging maneuver he had tried to use on Staff Sergeant James in the Korengal Valley. Only this time there was no gunfire. There was no extraction command. There was only Harper on the bank, screaming encouragement. "Bring him home, Ghost! Bring him home!" With a mighty, groaning heave, the 75-pound alpha pulled the 6-year-old boy off the root and threw his own body weight against the current. Ghost paddled frantically, keeping the boy's head above water, fighting inch by inch toward the muddy embankment. Harper waded into the shallows, grabbing the boy's arm and hauling him onto the safe, solid ground. Toby instantly wrapped his tiny arms around Harper's neck, sobbing hysterically. Ghost dragged himself out of the water, shaking the heavy mud from his dark coat. He didn't pace. He didn't growl. He simply walked over to the shivering child, lay down in the mud beside him, and rested his massive, scarred chin on Toby's small knee, offering his bodily warmth. 10 minutes later, the tactical team burst through the brush, led by Major Higgins and Master Sergeant Brody. They found the untouchable, untrainable, lethal liability of Block 9 standing protective guard over a sleeping child. Higgins stopped dead in his tracks, staring at the scene. Ghost looked up at the men in their heavy, black, tactical vests. The dog tensed for a brief moment, but Harper placed a gentle hand on his wet neck. Ghost relaxed, letting out a soft sigh, and held his ground. He didn't see triggers anymore. He just saw his pack. Higgins slowly lowered his radio. He looked at Harper, thoroughly soaked and covered in mud, and then at the magnificent animal by her side. "Corporal Reynolds," Higgins said, his voice surprisingly thick with emotion, "you can cancel that euthanasia order and get your partner to the infirmary. You both have a lot of active duty years ahead of you." Harper smiled, tears mixing with the rain on her face. She looked down at Ghost. The phantom perimeter was finally gone. He was home. If Harper and Ghost's incredible journey touched your heart, please hit that like button and share this video with a fellow dog lover. Stories of loyalty and second chances deserve to be told, and your support helps us bring more real-life military animal rescues to light. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a tale of unbreakable bonds. What did you think of Ghost's breakthrough? Let us know in the comments below.